Arts MCAT Social Psychology. Group psychology. So, social facilitation is when people perform differently when they know people are around. Yerke's Dodson model, which is go back to the previous videos, it says moderate arousal is peak performance. Well, Yerke's Dodson model also says people do well around people when they're performing simple tasks, and when tasks are complicated to them and they perform them around people, they're going to do them worse. De-individualization is the losing of self-awareness while you're in a group. Bystander effect is when people are in a group, they're less likely to respond to a person in need. Um, Peer pressure is when people are influenced by those they seem equal. So peers are those who are equal. Identity shift effect is when harmony is disrupted by social rejection. One will conform to the group in order to not get rejected by the group. And cognitive dissonance is the simultaneous presence of opposing thoughts and opinions. And social lofting is doing less work when one is in a group. So usually when you get into a group, you're like, oh yeah, I love group work. I don't have to do that much work. Group decision making. So group polarization is tendency to make extreme polarizing decisions when they're in a group. They won't look at the middle ground. It'll either be, the far right or the far left. That's really it. Groupthink is choosing ideas that arose within the group and ignoring those that come from outside the group. So, if you've got ideas, group members, you'll choose those ideas rather than, maybe like a teacher that's like, hey, I think you should do this. Group members will be like, nah, I want to do it myself. Culture. So these are the beliefs, ideas, behaviors, and actions of a group of society of people. Assimilation is when one culture melts into the other culture. This is usually uneven. So, like, let's say like Native Americans are assimilated into American culture. Lots of Native American culture is gone because they're trying to conform to American culture. However, assimilation can be slowed by ethnic enclaves or locations with high ethnicity. For example, Chinatown. And you'll see that there's a lot of like influence of still like Chinese culture in Chinatown. They're not necessarily completely assimilating and conforming to American culture. Multiculturalism is encouragement of within a community to enhance diversity equally, and subcultures are a group of people within a culture that distinguish themselves from the primary culture. Socialization is the process of developing norms, customs, and beliefs. Norms are all the acceptable stuff in society. Customs is the stuff that people do in a culture or society. Beliefs are all the stuff that they believe to be true, like such as like religion or political thought process. Primary socialization is when we learn acceptable attitudes as children. And secondary socialization is the process of learning appropriate behavior in society. Anticipatory socialization is when a person prepares for future occupations or situations. This is like couples living together before they get married to be like, yo, are we compatible or not? Resocialization is the process by which one adjusts to new life changes. So let's say like you go from the West Coast to the East Coast. The cultures are completely different. Or if you move to another country, you're re-socializing. You're like, all right, this is a really big life change. I need to figure out what's going on. How do I adjust to what's going on? Norms are the acceptable behavior in society, and mores are widely observed in social norms. Um, Stigma. Stigma is extreme disapproval or dislike of a person based on perceived differences from society. Really, the key idea is perceived differences from society. Deviance is violation of norms, rules, and expectations within a society. A taboo is a unacceptable behavior sociologically. Conformity is changing beliefs to fit into a group or society. Compliance is when individuals change behaviors at the request of others. So you comply with, let's say, the teacher's like, can you please act respectfully? So, let's say a classroom is a society, the student would comply with the teacher. This compliance is when requests of others. There's other ways compliance occurs. Foot in the door is small tasks lead to big tasks. You're putting a small foot in the door. Whereas the door in the face method is when you give an unreasonably big task and you're like, all right, I'll just get a smaller task done instead. Lowballing is saying something isn't much, but it's actually a lot harder than it is. And obedience is changing behavior based on command from someone as an authoritarian figure. This is the Milgram shock experiment where people wouldn't stop shocking because of authoritarian commands. Attitudes and behaviors. Attitudes are tendencies toward expression of positive and negative feelings or evaluations of something. Behavioral is how people act in certain situations, and cognitive is what they think about stuff. Functional attitudes, there's four different areas of attitudes: knowledge, ego expression, and three different areas: knowledge, ego expression, and ego defense. Learning theory, attitudes develop from learning. This can be direct contact, interaction, instruction, or conditioning, like operant conditioning. Elaboration likelihood model. Attitudes are formed and changed through different routes of transmission. So, central route is usually listening to the central argument, whereas peripheral route processing is focusing on all the other stuff: the behavior, the mannerisms, and the likableness of a person, not really looking at the central argument of what they're saying. The social cognitive theory is attitudes formed from behavior, personal factors, and environment. Example: work ethic is affected by previous attitudes to the hard work, systems of the company, and how hard their colleagues work. So the behavior would be how hard colleagues work, personal factors, previous attitude to the hard work, and environment is like, what's the company environment like? Is there a lot of room for improvement?